A couple videos ago, I touched on the subject of the book series that I've been writing, the group of intellectuals who follow in the footsteps of this evil aristocracy, um, and the evil nobleman John Roe, and his kidnapping of the child prodigy, Edmund. And one of the ways that I've been thinking it would be interesting to, I think, to add a twist or to add something that a new dimension to the story that I never really thought about before, perhaps in this book or the next, is to show a society that Dimitri enters. It could be sort of a fantastical society that's sort of governed by a combination of pedagogy and psychiatry. Which is kind of similar to what Griffith Alliance, this little mini organization that was created by the evil aristocracy, had done with this sort of group of intellectuals who were in charge of the United States. Right, but similarly, I want to show how this sort of psychiatric society that gaslights people is the outcome of these beings who are basically genetic offshoots of human beings. Right, and they have sort of different physical aberrations. Which I'm still working out. I'm still figuring out, even what they would resemble, how they would look. But I imagine that they would have very high IQs, and I think that a lot of the gaslighting that ends up creating these scapegoats and these people who end up being weakened so much that they can't stand up to the system that's constantly keeping everybody down. I think that ties into very much what I was discussing in the last video, or a couple of videos ago, about Edgar Allan Poe, and the way that he was portrayed as this debauched maniac. Because another thing that really irritates me about that is that, in a way, it scapegoats him, but it also makes him look more mainstream, but obviously not in a positive sense. Like it pathologizes him, but at the same time, it also makes him look like he's a part of a subculture that was intentionally designed to make people mentally and emotionally more susceptible to manipulation or more fragile. And you can see this in I think I brought it before, the beatnik generation, right? That they were fighting against what they thought was the sort of materialistic culture of pleasure seeking, but they would go out drinking, every single night, and they would their minds would sort of resemble that kind of Dionysian sort of insanity that Edgar Allan Poe is portrayed as, even though in reality he was a much more serious figure than that. But I think that similarly in my own book series, I want to show how what could be the very top of the totem pole, right? These sort of psychiatric figures, these genetic offshoots of human beings, could play similar tricks in making human beings emotionally very confused and addicted, and having, basically their lives being fraught with all these sorts of addictions, right? And I think within that society of debauched aristocrats, I think an idea that I've been toying with for a while is the idea that John Roe and his henchmen, or all of his courtiers, everybody, would often use this nasty ploy, and in terms of like trying to get people on their side, right? Is that they would turn often the families against their own children, like the parents, the mother, the father. They would go from loving to perfect, to suddenly really destructive, people, and turning them into monsters, and then having the children have to flee their homes only to then be kidnapped by John Roe and his men, right? And I think one of the most nightmarish thing about it is that usually these parental figures, or sometimes these just much older kind of mentor-like figures, are female, and so they go from being the figure of like the feminine archetype that we see of the muse, the person that cares for the younger person, to suddenly their minds sort of being completely destroyed. So it's that shift from purity to complete darkness, right? And I think that that's probably one of the most horrific things about the book series, and it's an idea that I want to continue to work with.